about them Irish?
I can't take it anymore. I need a national championship.
This is the Four Horsemen Podcast.
The Notre Dame Fighting Irish thrash the Stanford Cardinal and finish off an 11-1 season. Since this podcast has come into existence, Notre Dame is 43-6, which is an 87.8 win percentage, which includes 2 college football playoff appearances and possibly a third. No need to thank us. But before we get into possibly a third, I'm going to pass over to Steve with a word from our sponsor.
And Dylan, if you are in the market to move and get a new job and move to the booming cultural epicenter that is Norman, Oklahoma, then you can go to Dwindle. Dwindle is the first job board aimed at solving the student loan debt crisis. They will pair you up with jobs that will help pay down your student loans. You sign up for free. They will give you a free resume critique, and then you can start applying for jobs that will help you pay down your loans. Or alternatively, if you haven't even gone to school yet and you are looking for some tuition assistance, they can definitely hook you up with a job that can help you in that regard as well. So check them out at dwindlestudentdebt.com. That's DWINDLE, studentdebt.com. Let them know the Four Horsemen sent you.
Steve, I feel bad right now for Oklahoma fans. They suffered a tough 1-2 punch. But before I think we really get into the Sooners, let's talk about the only team that matters. That is the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. We could not beat Stanford at the farm for so long. I think our first win against them under Kelly came in the last time we were there, which would have been 2019.
Correct.
We now hammered them 45-14, which is disgustingly close to how you and I both predicted it, right? I went 42-10, you went 45-10.
45-14. Oh, yeah, no, 45-10, yeah. You're correct.
So we saw what was coming. We knew what happened, and Notre Dame was a bit merciful. Yet somehow there were fans complaining during the game that this team was not doing enough. What are your thoughts on the game? Like, talk me through it. Like, what's going on when you're watching the game, and how did you feel we performed?
Honestly, it was just no stress. Like, we came down, we scored on the opening drive, which I believe is the first time we've done that since Mayer's touchdown against Florida State, if I'm not mistaken. There could be another example in there, but I feel like you're hard-pressed to find one. So, started strong. Defense kind of just held them at bay the entire time. It wasn't, like smothering dominant, but in a way it kind of was. It just felt like, I don't know, they knew they had to pass the ball. They had a lot of incompletions. They couldn't run worth shit, and they didn't really put any points on until kind of a untimely interception that we threw when we were already up and blowing them out, and it felt very just systematic. There was no drama to it. There was no sweat. It was just, oh, well, the football game's on. I was editing that video that I put out like while I was watching the game simultaneously. So it's like I was just kind of like, look up, watch you play, be like, oh, nice, Notre Dame's really good. Go back, like edit the video on my phone, look up, it's the next play. Oh, we made another big stop. Okay, turnover, or punt, and Notre Dame's gonna come back and score. So that it just felt like we at no point were going to lose that game. We were supposed to win it. We went in and just won, and it was just very peaceful.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, and I could be wrong here, but I believe the Louvre said that your video would be introduced this year. Is that correct?
Yeah, at some point I'm expecting to make an exhibition out there, although I am banned from France. Don't ask.
I don't even know what to say to that. If you guys have not seen the video Steve made, you should go see it. It's amazing. It's like a compilation of The Wolf of Wall Street with some sweet music and then just a rocket going into space. It's bananas. It is so unbelievably good. So we beat Stanford. But like I said last week, it's not the team that we beat that signals why we're a top 4 team. It's the way we're beating them and the growth we're seeing every week. And yes, these are weaker opponents, but the issues that persisted in the first half of the season are no longer here. And just to give you an example, our offensive line was bad against Florida State and Toledo and every other garbage team we played. Now, when you look at the garbage teams we're playing these last few weeks, they've been good. And that's just one of the things we've been doing better, right? The defense has been utterly dominant. I mean, Stanford only scored a touchdown because we turned it over near our own end zone. So Marcus Freeman's got the boys going without Kyle Hamilton, which is absolutely bonkers. The running game's working a lot better. I don't think we are going to be a rush first for 250 yards team, nor should we want to be. I think the run game is good as is, which gives Jack Cohn the time and the ability to operate. And that's the thing, too, is you give that guy space. I say it all the time, all caps, lethal. Him in the pocket is one of the better quarterbacks in the country. The problem is you got to protect him in the pocket. That's the downside. But if you do, you will see what he does to defenses. He had thrown like 21 for 23 passes to start the game against Stanford. I mean, unbelievable accuracy. Dishing it out to everybody. We had said last week, big game for Michael Mayer was my prediction. We got a big game for Michael Mayer. Even Coach Kelly said at one point after the game that Stanford set up their D to prevent the run. So I'm not concerned with rushing yards being a little lower. The offense was dynamic. The offense was explosive. And it's exactly how I wanted to finish off the season. Do you want to talk Four Horsemen? Because, boy, is there a lot to get into from this week of college football. Just absolute chaotic shenanigans.
Yeah, of course. I think it'd be definitely beneficial in this case just to really highlight just a handful of players that really showed out because, like I mentioned, defensively on the defensive side of the ball, I guess I'll just be a little bit of a spoiler alert. It has to be Justin Ademilola. He had a sack. He had the sack fumble, picked up a fumble. He actually had 2 fumble recoveries on the day. Just kind of ended up being all over the place. So and his brother Justin also had a sack as well. So the Ademilola is leading us on the day, getting into the backfield. So other than that, other than his kind of standout performance on the defensive side of the ball, everyone else, they played great team defense. As an individual, no one else kind of really popped, so to speak. And I think that's just because Stanford's offense was just so boring, right? So it was kind of just a straightforward, just go out, do your job, and then, oh, hey, we're back on the sideline again because they have to punt. So that kind of covers defense. But is there anyone on offense that you wanted to highlight? I'll defer to you.
For sure. I mean, I've been raving about Cohn, so I'll just pick Cohn as the guy for me. An 83.2 QBR, which again is a very good score. That was right around where Ian Book was last year. So you're getting great quarterback performance again. Also, I want to shout out Michael Mayer. I feel like I called that one. He was dominant, 9 receptions. He's now the all-time reception leader for a tight end in a single season. Is that the correct statistic? That
is correct. Yeah, I think they posted that to the Notre Dame Instagram. So
that's awesome. Credit to him, and he has to come back next year. So it's going to be very exciting with him in the team. And then you know what? I'll give you the last one because you've been a big supporter of this guy for a very long time, and it's only fitting that you sing his praise.
Of course, it has to be Kevin Austin. What do you have? I think 6 receptions for 125 is, I think, somewhere in that neighborhood. Yeah, so he just was making big plays all game. I'm pretty sure once again he started the game really quick with a big reception and kind of bringing it down the field. Can make guys miss when he gets the ball in the open field, which is kind of one of those things that we haven't really had too much at Notre Dame recently. You think about Chase Claypool, think about oh my God, I can't believe Miles Boykin and even go back to X and Brown, right? And even Michael Floyd. I feel like Golden Tate's the exception here, but by and large, these guys have been bigger bodies, go up and make a play on a sideline, right? Go make if you have a 50-50 ball, go make a play, or a jump ball. A 12-yard comeback, maybe a 7-yard out, something along those lines, right? We haven't had that player make the catch in the middle of the field, make 3 defenders miss, and pick up an extra 15, 20 after the catch. And it seems like this guy has kind of been poised to do so at certain points of their season. So to see him pick up a bunch of yak yards in this game, very high on him. Love Kevin Austin.
Yeah, I would say Fuller is another exemption to that type of receiver. And then Claypool, I think, was kind of that harmony of the big man who could rack up the yak. But you're right there. Notre Dame has mostly had big-bodied guys, which I think has been to our detriment at times. But this current wide receiver group is impressive. They've been quietly good all year. You're getting contributions up and down the depth chart. I mean, Lorenzo Styles has filled in for, I think it was mainly Joe Wilkins who got hurt, and that's when you started to see Styles come in a little more. Colsey's had some game time. It's just great to see. It's great to see Lindsey score touchdowns kind of to wrap up the season, right? Is a guy who's been plagued with injuries finally kind of breaking through. So I'm hoping one of those two guys come back next year. I'd like to see Styles and Colsey paired with, let's say, like Kevin Austin, and then you bring in the incoming freshman class. I think we could absolutely use from having one of those guys back, or Lindsey, or both. But it's an exciting time, and I think you hit the nail on the head there with Austin really coming into his own and going to be a huge factor in whatever the next game is for Notre Dame.
Correct. And let's hope that there's 2 more games for Notre Dame, which we will absolutely cover in the course of time. But I suppose that does cover our 4 horsemen of the week. And I'll let you, our fearless leader, bring us into the next topic.
Before we do, Tyler Buchner, 99.8 QBR despite throwing negative passing yards. That, my friends, is a god. That's the only person who could have a almost perfect QBR score with negative passing yards. Has to be a supreme being or an alien or something. And that might be Tyler Buchner. But in all seriousness, he ran for like a 50-yard touchdown, and that would be it. We're not declaring him the next Heisman winner, but there is so many. Yeah, Steve is. To be fair, Steve has been doing that for a year and a half now. But totally. Look, he's played excellent this year for a freshman in a backup role, in a mainly niche role too. You know, people have complained about his accuracy, but it's like he's not given the best passing opportunities at Notre Dame. You know, I'm sure he's got to work a little bit on some of that stuff, but as a whole, there's nothing but positives for Buchner for me. But anyway, let's get into the college football playoff. Wow, what a few weeks, eh? Nobody wanted to be in the playoff. Now we all want to be in the playoff, and it's crazy. So we've highlighted numerous times on Twitter and on the show how Notre Dame gets in. Let's just check in with how the week went. So for the first time in a decade, the Michigan Wolverines beat the Ohio State Buckeyes. That was shocking. I had money on Ohio State, as I do yearly. But fair enough. Fair play to Michigan. They were the better team. They controlled the second half. I watched the game. I hate everything about Michigan. It's an ugly stadium. It's an ugly color of piss yellow. I do like that song, though, when they go, "It's great to be a Michigan Wolverine." That's all right. I can stomach that. But the rest of it, can't stand you. But that's a problem for another day. They will be playing Iowa in the Big Ten championship game because we all presumed Wisconsin would beat a bad Minnesota team, and they did not. So Iowa becomes the winner of the West. They'll play Michigan, the winner of the East, and that's something for Notre Dame to watch. The second big game was the Iron Bowl. Alabama, lucky as hell to escape that one with a victory. Auburn was shutting them down for most of the game. Of course, Alabama in the second half makes a bit of a comeback, and they win in 4 overtimes. Auburn is a 6-5 team, remind you. So how good is Bama is the question we're about to find out. They'll play Georgia as winner of West versus winner of East in the SEC. And then the other big game, and this was important too, we said last week, none of these games can get Notre Dame in or out of the playoff alone. That's all this week. But this set the stage for what we needed. And you get the big matchup in Bedlam, Oklahoma State, Oklahoma. The Sooners lose a very close game to the Cowboys. That game was going on the same time as Notre Dame, so I didn't get to watch too much of it. I did catch the last drive. Congratulations to the Sooners for losing, but also congratulations for Oklahoma State for winning. They're now going to play Baylor in the Big 12 championship game because in the Big 12, the top 2 records play each other. So that'll be a rematch. And that's mainly what happened. So what we're looking at now for Notre Dame is a minimum of one thing needs to happen, but most likely two. So the minimum of one is you have 5 teams ahead of you right now. You have Georgia, Alabama, inevitably Michigan, Cincinnati, and then it's either you or Oklahoma State. We'll find out on Tuesday if the committee has Notre Dame ahead or behind Oklahoma State. I believe they'll have Notre Dame ahead temporarily because the second you put Oklahoma State ahead of Notre Dame, when Notre Dame has no more games to play, that's irreversible. If Oklahoma State wins the Big 12 championship and you've already put them ahead of Notre Dame, you cannot justify flipping it. And I think the committee wants to give themselves a little more flexibility there. And I think they'll keep Notre Dame ahead of Oklahoma State for this week. We'll find out next week if that matters. So a minimum of one of things have to happen. Georgia has to beat Alabama, Cincinnati has to lose to Houston, or Iowa beats Michigan. If one of those 3 things happen, Notre Dame is in. However, or could be in, sorry. They could be in. However, the problem is it'll come down to Oklahoma State versus Notre Dame, right? And that's what we don't know yet. Because Notre Dame is ranked ahead of Oklahoma State, but Oklahoma State has that Big 12 title game against Baylor, who is also ranked in the top 10. The feeling is among most people that the Oklahoma State Cowboys will jump Notre Dame. I think that's probably what's going to happen, and I had said that on the podcast with Rob weeks ago. That was my concern. But I'd rather be Oklahoma State than Oklahoma for those financial considerations I had mentioned last week. I think Oklahoma State is such a large gap between Notre Dame in terms of the revenue they'll bring in that it might factor into their decision, whereas Oklahoma is close enough to Notre Dame to just completely overlook it. So then, to finish off this long rambling rant, you will need a second element to guarantee Notre Dame's playoff berth. So that is one of those ones that I've listed and another one. So just to go over it, Georgia beats Alabama. This is the most likely. Iowa beats Michigan. That's possible. Houston beats Cincinnati. That's also possible. Houston has won, I think, like 10 straight games. And then you would need Baylor to beat Oklahoma State. So one of those things gives us a shot to get in. 2 of those things guarantees our spot in my opinion. It is totally possible the committee comes out tomorrow or Tuesday, because we're recording on Sunday, and puts Ohio State ahead of Notre Dame. If that's the case, we're dead because Ohio State isn't playing anymore either. And that would make no sense. But that is a distinct, but I'll even say lesser possibility. So Notre Dame to get in, 2 of those 4 guarantees it, in my opinion. One of them, and you are still alive. Steve, which of those scenarios do you think is most likely?
I am going to count on that awful, terrible, horrible, no good, very bad school up north to absolutely fucking shit themselves on the scale, on the biggest scale that there is, in prime time, basically. So I'm going to say go Hawkeyes. I think Cincy's going to win. I just think that they have too much, they have too much to prove. That it's a playoff game for them, right? Yeah. They have no margin for error. So Cincy has to play their best game, and I think we're going to get that.
And I'll say Cincy also has to impress the committee, because if none of those teams lose, it's possible Oklahoma State jumps Cincinnati.
That's exactly correct.
So Cincy has a real motivation to put Houston away.
Yeah, if they win by 3 and Oklahoma State wins by 40, right? Like then it's like, oh shit, like that's a conversation. Although I mean I'm crunching the numbers now and things are not particularly looking fantastic for Oklahoma State, and I'll get into that more in a couple minutes. But I also think that Oklahoma State's at a pretty, I would say, decent chance to lose. I mean, it's more so an indictment that Baylor is, you got to give them credit where credit's due. They've built a pretty decent program there. Oklahoma State did show some grit. I mean, they came back to win that game against Oklahoma in Bedlam. They they do have a defense that is a little bit better. They did, by and large, I think they shut down Baylor to only 2 touchdowns in their first matchup. I think it was like 27-14 if I remember correctly. So I would say it's more likely that Iowa beats Michigan slightly less likely, but still quite likely that Baylor would win. And if both of those scenarios happen, we're actually the number 3 seed, which is crazy.
Well, that's what I wanted to get into too. If 3 of those things happen, you would think they would make Notre Dame the 3 seed. However, if they're playing Cincinnati, they may prefer to do that swap where they'll say, well, you know what, we don't want a rematch. So whoever the 4 is will become the 3 and Notre Dame will become the 4. I am a little worried about that. But what I wanted to ask you is, what happens if 3 of those things happen? Let's say, I think the most likely thing is Georgia beats Alabama. I think that is probably what's going to happen easiest. Let's say that happens. So Bama is gone, okay? So you've got Georgia in. Then let's say Iowa beats Michigan. So Michigan is gone. And then let's say Cincinnati wins. And then Baylor beats Oklahoma State. Who is your 4?
All right, so you said Baylor wins, Cincinnati wins, and then what was the last?
Georgia wins. No, Iowa beats Michigan.
Okay, so Iowa wins, Baylor wins, Cincinnati wins, Georgia wins.
Yes.
Yeah, so you'd have to do it would have to be. It just has to be. In that case, Georgia, Cincinnati, Notre Dame.
Yes. Who's that 4th? I don't know. 2 lost Bama after just playing Georgia. That's why I think maybe they would drop Bama to 3 and put Notre Dame in at 4 anyway. So I don't even know if the 3 seed is possible for us.
Because I was going to say maybe Ohio State, but they're already 2 losses, so they're eliminated.
And if Michigan loses, Michigan has to get in over Ohio State. So Baylor, could we put a 2-loss Baylor in? Could we put a 2-loss Oregon in?
I think there's more of a case for Baylor because they would be at that point 11-2, but a conference champion, a major conference champion, and they just beat the team that you currently have on, kind of at the number 5 seed, right? So if you have 2 top 5 teams losing, and you have the team that beats the number 5 seed with the same exact record, it's like you kind of got to put Baylor in, right? I think in that case it should be, in my opinion. It should be UGA, Cincy, Notre Dame, Baylor in that scenario.
See, it bothers me because I'm worried. There's 4 things that could happen. We need 2 of them. I'm worried that not only are we going to get 2 of them, we might get 3 of them. And that might open up the door for Alabama to get back in, which to me is just as bad as any other team staying in that top 4, right? The benefit of Michigan beating Ohio State is we don't have to play Ohio State ever. My concern with if 3 of these teams lose, that Bama might actually stick. So that's what's interesting is we need 2, but we got to be wary if we get 3 or even 4. Like imagine if all 4 of those situations happen. Let's say Georgia wins, Houston beats Cincy, Iowa beats Michigan, and Baylor beats Oklahoma State. Notre Dame is the 2 seed. And who's your 3 and your 4? I suppose Baylor and Alabama. Maybe Michigan stays in there. It can get wild, folks. That's what we want to bring up is how insane this could get. And not to cheer for everything. So that's going to be weird because we're going to need 2 of these things to happen. So we don't care which 2 happen. We just need it to happen. And in the process, we could end up with more than we bargained for. But at the end of the day, we just want to get into the playoff. And we can worry about the rest later. I mean, the 3 seed's ideal. My ideal playoff at this point is Georgia, Cincinnati, Notre Dame, Oklahoma State. That I would like that. I just don't trust that Oklahoma State wouldn't be jumping Notre Dame. So I want to avoid Georgia round 1, and I don't know if Oklahoma State wins if they'll stay at number 4. But yeah, that's the playoff talk. Steve, which matchup are you most forward to watching of the 4? Like, is there a game there that intrigues you more than the rest?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I don't know. I guess I'm more intrigued to watch the Big Ten, right? Because if we were to have a home, if we were to ever join a conference, which we absolutely under no circumstances ever should, but if we were, it would just be logical to join the Big Ten, in my opinion, obviously. So that would be the most intriguing matchup to me. would be Iowa versus Michigan. Plus, I want to see Michigan blow it.
Yeah, that would be a very Michigan thing to do. And I think Iowa's a good team. I think we've all forgot about them, but they have been quietly good all year, and they play such a typical Big Ten standard of football. They can give Michigan problems. Their defense could really lock Michigan down, and if Michigan can't do the same, I could see Iowa winning this game. Obviously, they're not going to be betting favorites, but that's certainly not out of the realm of possibility. I mean, we've seen Michigan struggle to Penn State. We've seen them lose to Michigan State. I don't think either of those teams are particularly better than Iowa. Like, I'd probably take Iowa to beat both Penn State and Michigan State. Maybe they've played already this year. My knowledge of the Big Ten doesn't go that deep. But just the way, from what I've seen from the teams, I think Iowa is pretty underrated, and I think they're going to give Michigan a lot of hell. But speaking of hell, Lincoln Riley announced today, as reported by On3 Sports, will be taking, and I'm sorry, everybody, I don't control this. Don't shoot the messenger. He will be taking the USC head coaching job. It shockwaves. This is the biggest power move I think that's been made with coaching since LSU lost Saban to Alabama. Like, this is crazy stuff. Lincoln Riley at one point was discussed for NFL head coaching jobs, and it wasn't sure or clear he would leave Oklahoma for one of them. And I think USC is a better job than Oklahoma, no doubt. But I didn't think it was, to me, it was still kind of a lateral move. But the fact that USC went to Oklahoma, they went to another blue blood, and they said, "I'll be having your coach, thanks." That is some power move alpha male stuff right there. I got to give credit to the Trojans. That is horrifying that it happened. Steve, you and P seem to have a different opinion of me on Lincoln Riley. I think he is an offensive genius. You guys think he's a bit overrated. Do you want to kind of explain that point?
Yeah, I mean, okay, wow, whoop-de-doo. In a conference with absolutely no defense whatsoever, you have teams that put up a lot of points, and then anytime you face anyone in the playoffs, you get absolutely waxed, right? Like, all of I have put the metric up on Twitter. They are 0-4 in the playoff, and they have, I think, at least 2 losses worse than Notre Dame by point difference, right? So you want to talk about this big program, historically, that just absolutely blows it and can't win the big game. It's like, that stink is definitely down in Norman as well, or at least it should be if people are being intellectually honest, which we know they never will be when it comes to Notre Dame. Yep. But anyway, I mean, so this is a guy that he's never really won the big game. I mean, yeah, you won a couple of Big 12 championships. Like, that's the equivalent of the Massachusetts State Championship for me for like high school football. Like, I think you're probably going to see a better game here than in the Big 12. So, and then for me, it's like you're at a program where historically you were basically guaranteed 10 wins. You were basically guaranteed a conference title shot. And then if you won your conference title, there was a really good chance you were going to make it to the playoff. And they obviously have 4 times already. Now you're going to the SEC, and I think he's just saying, like, oh, shit, we're an 8-4 program in the SEC. We're a 7-5 program in the SEC if they play like they did this year. Maybe even 6-6. And it's like, okay, cool, you got all these fancy recruits and everything, and you can put up 45 points a game. You're going to get scored 70 against Alabama. Against, even Ole Miss would put up numbies against them. I mean, come on, man. So it's like, I mean, look at LSU. They even in their down year, they just knock off Texas A&M. Texas A&M is a building and pretty damn good program. Like, they were a big fish in a small pond, and now they are a decent sized fish moving into the ocean. And he realized, in my opinion, he's like, I'm out. I'm not going to tarnish my legacy. While I'm just going to go out to the Pac-12, which is also a poverty conference, with realistically 2 to 3 schools that even stand a chance at a title every year or any sort of national relevance. USC being one of them by default, because you're just going to get better recruits that just want to go to LA. Why? Yep. Beyond me, but we'll get to that in a couple of segments. but so at the end of the day, I think for me and for Mr. Wagon, who agrees with me, this is Lincoln Riley taking the easy way out. And it's like, okay, cool. You're going to go from a program that this year went 4-7. They're probably going to go 4-8, and maybe you get them to 7-5. Maybe you get them to 8-4. Maybe you even get them to 9-3. But it's just, I don't know. I think he'll be out of a job within 4 years because the expectations for him are so high. Yep. That he's, I believe it might have been Joel Klatt, but I can't remember. So I do want to give credit, but I just don't have the memory for it, as everyone knows. Someone mentioned that most programs, 95% of college football programs, are 6-year rebuilds. And that's why you have to give credit for Nebraska sticking by Scott Frost. And Nebraska went 3-9 this year, but all 9 of their losses have been by 1 score or less.
Nebraska, 2016 Notre Dame.
Yeah, exactly correct. 2016 Notre Dame. And look what happened when we stuck by Brian Kelly. We've now had 5 consecutive seasons or 10 wins or more. So I think that Nebraska, low key, could potentially going to win the conference next year, or at least compete for it. They're going to compete for it.
That's a bomb.
I think they are an 8 to 10 win team next year. So, but that's because it takes a while to resurrect these programs. And USC, yeah, like we've already mentioned, we even mentioned the talking point leading up to the game as a preview. They are naturally, inherently going to get high prospects. But when you don't have a winning culture and when you don't have a team that can come, like, if you don't have the right mentality, all your stars are for nothing.
So what you're saying, Steve, is that Lincoln Riley could end up being Charlie Weiss. Really great recruiting classes, great offenses, but utterly dog shit everywhere else.
Exactly.
Okay, so I'll push back. With the Nebraska thing, the potential's there because they're in the Big Ten West, and you can win so many of those games by just not being Purdue or Indiana. You know what I mean? Like, you could win those. Those are all winnable games. Okay, I'll push back here. I think the Pac-12 being easier and an easier path to the playoff, both in a 4-team playoff situation and in an expanded playoff, because in the expanded playoff, every conference champion of the Power 5 plus bid. 1 is an auto bid, and then the highest 4 get a bye. That's the proposal. So in both of that situation, the Pac-12 and USC is way easier. And I think that factors into it because I think that's part of the appeal of USC is that you get to go be the only power in the Pac-12, and then you get to compete against Oregon and Notre Dame on a yearly basis. However, what I'll push back on is I don't think he's afraid of the SEC. I think it's more the USC job is way more appealing, partially because it's easier, but not entirely. And also, I'm not afraid of the SEC. And this is what I'll say. So people are looking at, he left Oklahoma right before they were going to the SEC, and he turned down LSU, who's in the SEC. Therefore, he's afraid of the SEC. I don't agree with that because, like I've said a million times on Twitter, USC is a better job than LSU. If you got those 2 offers, USC is the better job, partially because it's easier, but for so many other reasons as well. I don't think he would be afraid to go to the SEC with Oklahoma or even LSU, because LSU is one of the top 3 teams kind of historically in the SEC and even in recent memory. I don't think that's the case. Yes, it would be harder, but there are reasons USC is appealing even over Oklahoma. It's in Los Angeles. It's a way easier recruiting job. Oklahoma right now has multiple 5-star recruits from Southern California. Like, think about the job he could do there, right? You're at one of the bluest bloods in the sport. LA, USC, the Coliseum, it's sexy, right? You're going to get ratings. You're going to get national appeal. And you're always going to have that path to the playoff. I think that is independent of I'm afraid to play in the SEC. I think the Pac-12 being easier is certainly part of it. But I think USC came in and offered a stupid amount of money. And I think if it wasn't for the money, he probably stays at Oklahoma. And I think he would go to the SEC there. I don't think he's crazy for leaving. I think he's a genius for leaving because USC, we've said, is that
giant.
I
think he's a genius for leaving because I think he knows he was going to get exposed if he stayed.
That's possible. That's possible.
That's me and Mr. Wagon's take on it, and that's kind of the beauty of the show is diversity of opinion, and this is why you're going to get a whole bunch of viewpoints
and a whole bunch of different tweets.
Exactly correct. Yeah, as you guys are following us on game day or even just talking about anything throughout the week, if you notice that there are 3 totally and completely different tones and viewpoints that all contradict each other, that's because you have 3 idiots on one Twitter account.
Yeah, that's the charm of it. Okay, so let's talk about the implications of this. So, Lincoln Riley is a good recruiter. I don't think there's too much doubt to that. And he's been doing it at a program that doesn't have a lot to offer. That's the sad thing. And I'm sorry for Oklahoma, but Norman is probably worse than South Bend, which is saying something. It's Oklahoma. You're in the middle of nowhere. Speaking of cities I don't want to live in. And on top of that, it's not a natural football producing state. And it's not a high academic school. So, like, what are you pitching these kids other than, yeah, we can get you to the NFL and we can compete? Sure, so can Ohio State and Alabama and LSU and Florida and Notre Dame and Michigan and USC. Like, what makes Oklahoma special? And, I mean, there's reports that what they do there is they, like, show off fancy cars and they have celebrities come. And it's like, that's all fluff. At USC, if you're doing that and winning at Oklahoma, like winning recruits, boy, you're going to have a much easier time at USC because USC, for one, is a good private school. Second of all, you're in Los Angeles. You do not have to appeal to the Norman crowd, right? You've got a city that attracts a lot of young people. On top of that, you're at such a historic place too at USC. You got that same history pitch Oklahoma would have. So I think recruiting is going to get a lot better for USC, and that's always been my fear. That's why I didn't want Urban Meyer there. And I think Lincoln Riley poses that threat. Do you agree with the recruiting aspect? And if you do, is it just the footballing aspect that you think isn't a problem?
Yeah, that's the thing. Is I think he undoubtedly, like I'll give him the credit. He's going to bring them from a 4-8 program into a perennial 8+, win program, most likely. But I think by the time that he can even get to relevance, he will be fired because the expectations are so high. Right? It's like you're Lincoln Riley. But, you're the guy that wins with the program. You're right. I'll let you go.
I just sort of cut you off all the time, but I just want to add something for you to consider. Okay, not like just something for you to think about. With the exception of this class, the last class, USC has had very good classes, and we've talked about their roster score in terms of like the recruiting they've done is often just up there with us. Their issue's also been development. They've been recruiting a little worse than they should be. Instead of number 1, they're number 10. But the development's the issue. So do you think it's going to take 4 years, or do you think he's already got the talent there to kind of make a run?
Yeah, that's what I think he'll have the talent to make a pretty quick turnaround. But to be at national relevance and to even be at conference relevance for the SEC for the Pac-12 South, that's not all locked up with Utah looking like they have some staying power there. So and who knows with Stanford can potentially rebound. They've had some down years and if they can get a fresh coach in there and mix things up, they might be 3 to 4 years away from kind of starting to become a competitor again as well. Arizona State is always kind of like, yeah, who knows? So and then UCLA is frisky. They're frisky. So I just, yeah, I mean, will they get better? Absolutely. And in a way, I'm excited about it. I want the Notre Dame USC games to mean more. I want them to be ranked when they come to South Bend or when we go out to LA. Those games were so fun. Think about the Sam Darnold game or the game where, in South Bend where, Josh Adams broke off that massive run and it just kind of sealed everything. Right. And those were oftentimes, especially when we go out to LA for Thanksgiving weekend, that's usually the last game of the year. And that's like, are we going to get into the playoff or not? Right. You think of the Tony Jones screen pass that propelled us into the playoff effectively. And that was such an exciting matchup. So in a manner of speaking, yeah, I do want USC to be a 8, 9, 10 win team. I just don't want them to be an 11 or 12 win team.
No, that's exactly it. I want USC to be a top 10, 15 team, but I don't want to lose to them. That's my issue with Lincoln Riley is Yeah, he's going to bring them back to prominence. And what I fear is it's going to be more than just prominence. I think I'm worried that could be a direct threat to us in the series. Like, them beating us is a bad thing. And then B, I think USC could win a national championship. And before everybody freaks out, do you guys not remember what USC was 15 years ago? I wasn't even watching college football, and I still know what they were. That was a powerhouse. It didn't last as long as the Saban Bama dynasty, which is still fucking ongoing, might I add. But
Just
from like 04 to a certain period of time there, even before 04, they claim 03, they were unbelievable. They were an unbelievable program, and they were recruiting guys like Matt Leinart, who admitted he grew up a Notre Dame fan, Reggie Bush. That's my concern is
Lendale White, friggin' Lofa Tatupu, Troy Palomalu. I mean, the list goes on and on.
Well, and they dominated Hawaii, which has not been the case recently. In fact, Notre Dame, ever since Manti Te'o, we've been taking a lot out of Hawaii. So you're worried about that. You worry about your pipelines in California. We've talked about it before. Do we still have Tyler Buckner? Do we still have Isaiah Foskey? Like
CJ Williams is now a potential flip back.
So that's part of my concern there too. Is USC being a better recruiting team also hinders Notre Dame's ability to go in and get kids. So that's part of it too. But you know what? Even if you guys are critical of it, which you rightfully are, you don't think he's necessarily the slam dunk, surefire hit that I think he is. I think we would all recognize that USC made a good move here, though.
I would say he's very good, just not amazing, and that's where I'm drawing my distinction.
I didn't know he was on the market, but if he was, he's the top coach on the college football market. Like, I'd take him over Fickell. I'd take him over James Franklin. I'd take him over Matt Campbell. I think he's a top 5 coach in college football. Maybe he's top 15 for the rest of you, but I think USC couldn't have done any better here. And I hate that they did it. But that is what it is. So with that, let's get into some mailbag and some shenanigans here. Have a little fun to finish off the podcast, since we are sitting at home this week waiting for the conferences to determine their artificial Mickey Mouse winner. Because of course conferences are Mickey Mouse trophies. We asked everybody on Twitter in a poll question, do you think Notre Dame will make the college football playoff? And I absolutely love the results of this poll. It started off a hot 9-1 in favor of yes, and we have seen a lot of poll movement with about 120 votes in, which is a decent sample size. It's 53% yes, 47% no, and that's where I lean. I think it's 50-50 Notre Dame gets in. I said I think that was the case last week as well. I don't think anything has gotten better or worse for Notre Dame. We just now know what we need. So I think there's a 50% chance we get into the playoff. That seems to be what most of you think as well. You're either on the yes side or the no side at a 50% rate. Steve, gun to your head right now, are we making the playoff?
Yes. I am counting on Oklahoma State or Michigan to blow it. They're just not teams that I trust that are going to have the mental fortitude to live up to the expectations, nor mentally and then physically. Like, are they good enough flat out to just like win these games 8 out of 10 times? No, I think it's closer to 60-40. And if you're giving me a 40% chance and you have 2 times, and you have a lot of pressure and expectations and the mentality of these kids who are, as a reminder, 18 to 21 years old. Sorry, man. I think, especially in this year, it's just absolutely insane. There's been so many upsets and losses and everything. And yeah, chaos. The rule this year has been chaos ensues, and there's been almost no exception to that rule so far. So I'm going to stick with it.
So my question to you is, when Alabama plays Georgia, do we want a close game, running the risk that a 2-loss Bama could somehow stay ahead of Notre Dame? Or do we want a blowout, guaranteeing Alabama is gone, but making us scared as hell to play Georgia? What there is worse for you? Like, what would you rather on Saturday or Sunday, whenever they're going to play this game? What kind of outcome do you want in that one?
A happy medium. I want Honestly, if it's like, I don't know, 20-7, 17-6, like, I mean, you think about Alabama just struggled mightily, mightily. They scored 6 points in regulation, did they not? No, wait, that's impossible.
No,
10
10.
points.
Yeah, they
10
hit
points
10.
in regulation
Yeah,
against Auburn. I mean, and they had a missed field goal too. So because of a bad snap. But I mean, regardless, I mean, basically you round up and let's just say they make that kick, and even if it still goes to overtime, they scored 13 in regulation on the road against Auburn. Right? And that's, you know, that Georgia's going to travel well to the SEC championship game because it's going to
Sure.
be in the dome there in Atlanta. So it's just, I don't know. I expect maybe a 60-40, maybe even 65-35 UGA crowd because they're absolutely insane down in Athens. This is their year. But I don't want Georgia to put up like 40. But if we can get like a 17-3 Georgia win, where it's just like there was no doubt in our minds that Alabama just isn't it, like they were a paper tiger, and then we can effectively eliminate them from the conversation and say they, if you look back at their wins, they're really not great, and if you look back at their losses, or they were not very good whatsoever, then I think that's gonna go a long way for kind of eliminating them. But then with Georgia, if they only look like they can score 17-20 against an extremely good defense, because Alabama's defense is still extremely good, I think that will lend more credence to our idea, which is it's a race to 20 if we play them.
Yeah, and here's the reason I bring it up is last week we all thought, oh, Michigan beating Ohio State, there's no risk in that. But then it happened. And watching the game, we all started thinking, oh God, is Ohio State going to stay ahead of Notre Dame? And I just bring it up because you think one thing going into it, and then it actually happens, and you realize there are more possibilities than you thought. And this leads into my next question. So I will answer. I'll list it here because we did mailbag. This is from our friend Benny at Benny_6 on Twitter. Benny's big fan of the show, big friend of the show. That's reciprocated, Benny. Love to have you. So he asks, would you rather play Georgia, Michigan, or Cincinnati in the playoffs? / bowl, but let's just go with the playoffs here. And the reason I led that into the Michigan thing is, I'll give you my answer first. The answer is Cincinnati because we know what Cincinnati is. I think Cincinnati could beat Michigan if they played each other, but we don't really know what Michigan is because we haven't played them. We've played Cincinnati. I know we can beat Cincinnati. I think we could beat Michigan, but Michigan won't beat Ohio State. I don't know how we match up with Michigan. I do know we match up with Cincinnati. So for the certainty there, I think Cincinnati's the more likely win. I also think we could blow out Michigan. Like, I don't know what happens in that Notre Dame-Michigan game, but I do know how Cincinnati-Notre Dame looks, and I'll take the devil I know versus the devil I don't, if that makes sense.
Notre Dame beats Cincinnati 31-14. Notre Dame they beat them by 2 touchdowns, and that's also why I echo the sentiment at choosing Cincinnati in this scenario, and then Michigan would obviously be the second. Right? Like far and away, Georgia we understand is the number one. Now there is something to say that it's just like it would be really cool to play our bitter, very hated rival, in a playoff game, and if we were to beat them, and not only get the kind of the stink off our back, but also just like rub their face in it. I mean, we're talking about me starting to get extraordinarily sexually aroused. So it's just that would be really, really fun, but I think there's more of a risk that we lose to Michigan than we lose to Cincinnati. I think if we play Cincinnati 10 times, we're winning 7 out of 10 of the games.
Yeah, I agree.
Probably even 8.
Yeah, I think it's Cincinnati, no doubt, because I know we can beat them. I'm going to ask you a question from Dave Hodges, or it's more of a comment. Some people agree with him. Some people have been calling him 10-ply. It's for the listeners to decide. And Steve, I want you to respond to it because you were in this camp at one point, so you would have the best answer. Mm-hmm. So he says, responding to should we be in the playoff or can we make it? He says maybe, but why? We would, and I quote here, we would be going in at a 4 seed only. Most likely that is true, by the way. To get beat by 30 by Georgia. Go win a bowl game and keep mojo going into the opening game next year. If they could get to 3, then I would love a Cincinnati rematch. Let's just focus on I'd rather not be the 4 seed and instead play a bowl game. Steve, you were once in that camp, so I want you to address it from your perspective.
I was in that camp when we were seeing Georgia blow everybody out, and we were seeing Notre Dame have struggle, with our offensive line midway through the season, even against, USC and UNC. Like we won those games. Yeah, we won those games convincingly, and we still didn't even play great. And at that point, I was like, yeah, we are trending in the right direction. We're winning all the games we need to. But if you asked me at that time, I was like, no, we will put up a maximum of 10 points against that Georgia team, and they will put up at least 20 against us, and likely it would be 30-10 at that point. At that point, right? I just don't see that is going to be the case anymore, and that's why I'm starting to come back. Notre Dame has obviously looked better and better and better every single week. Offensive line, Kyren's incredible, by and large, with the exception of Avery Davis and a couple of linebackers, fucking blast kid.
That slipped. That was bad.
That's because I've been drinking a little bit of whiskey, so that's when the Boston comes out of me, kid. Okay, pull it back in, reel it in. Don't be an inbred. Okay. So we have a couple of linebackers that are a little bit banged up, but other than that, we are fairly healthy and kind of firing on all cylinders heading to the point where playoffs are in contention. Tom Rees has been so much better and so much more effective at play calling. Exactly. He's made the adjustments. Jack Cohn played an unbelievable game against Stanford, and the last couple of weeks he's been on fire. So do I still think that Georgia probably wins 6 out of 10 games against us? Do they still most likely beat us? Yeah, but I just in a game where I foresaw us losing 30-3 like we did back in 2018, I'm now seeing it to be closer than it was against Bama last year, which was 31-14.
Okay, so I wanted to bring up Bama from last year because Bama from last year for me, and that was the only game I've ever taken Notre Dame to lose, is because that was a 1 in 10 chance for me. Notre Dame wins that game 1 of 10 times. Mm-hmm. This Georgia game is not that. This Georgia game is 4 out of 10 times Notre Dame wins, maybe 3. But a significant enough amount of times out of X amount of games, we will win. With the Bama one last year, there was very little hope if the game plan wasn't executed perfectly. Exactly. Notre Dame can have an offensive game plan that mixes, and they could beat Georgia. Because Georgia is not going to most likely blow you out with your defense, whereas Alabama did. To beat Alabama, you had to be perfect, and we absolutely were not. So it's not that. I agree with you 100%. Here's the thing. How spoiled are we to the point where we're 11-1 and we're thinking of refusing a playoff bid? Next year, folks, listen to me. We play Ohio State and Clemson. There is no guarantee we are in this situation
and
next
now
year.
USC with Lincoln Riley.
Or ever again. We could fall off the face of the earth in 2 years. We don't know. You take your chances when you get them, because even when you have a great roster, injuries happen, flukes happen. You never know when you're going to drop games. We're at 11-1. I want to get in. Another thing is, I'm going to take issue with this one. Go win a bowl game and keep mojo going for the opening game next year. No. Here's the thing. You want the hard, cold truth? Recruits care about you getting into the playoff. They don't care if you win the Sugar Bowl or the Fiesta Bowl. You get into the playoffs, it helps your recruiting. It helps you keep CJ Williams. It helps you go flip Sonny Styles.
Junior Tui Halimaka.
It makes you get Dante Moore, because Michigan might be in the playoff too. And that's if that's a Notre Dame-Michigan battle, you want to be right there. We're talking about Carnell Tate's thinking about Notre Dame. These are some high-level recruits.
Xavier and Wampa.
You want to be in the playoff. You want that exposure. You want to compete. I will take a Georgia team that I am a 14-point underdog against. No problem. No problem for me. To me, the opportunity to win a national championship is worth a slight embarrassment on another big stage. Because who cares? The playoffs going to expand to 12. So like we're going to be hopefully in the playoff more. Take your chances when you can get them. It's only going to get harder. When you have 12, sure, we get in harder. We got to go through 3 or 4 rounds of playoffs. So it's different. It's different. I'm totally not with Dave there.
Yeah, I agree. And then I guess to wrap up our thoughts, to be as succinct as possible, what though the odds be great or small? I'm going to let you take it.
Well, Notre Dame will win overall.
Exactly.
So that's who we are. The Notre Dame, everything about us, the moniker, the Fighting Irish is about resiliency. It's about, like the Irish in Ireland when they came over, was discrimination and being kept down and fighting back. That's the Notre Dame program. Notre Dame was almost destroyed by Michigan in the early 1900s when they stopped playing us. Every Notre Dame historical moment has often been us as the underdog. Miami in '88, we were probably the underdog in that game. '93 Florida State, we were probably the underdog in that game. You think about like breaking Oklahoma's winning streak twice. Oklahoma lost twice in a decade, both to Notre Dame. They started another series, and then lost to Notre Dame again. That's who we are. That we don't stop from a fight. That's why we're the Fighting Irish. Like this weak mentality, I think I see from people kind of drives me nuts because that's not what Notre Dame is. But anyway, carrying on. Drew Brennan, host of the Exit 77 podcast, check that one out. He asks, if Marcus Freeman doesn't take a head coaching job this year, do you think that says something about his head coaching future at Notre Dame? For him, he thinks there's too many jobs right now, and he thinks he leaves this summer. So let's break that into 2. We'll say 1, does Marcus Freeman leave this summer? And if he doesn't, do we think that says something about him staying at Notre Dame as a head coach in the future?
Let me do it. I know this is an audio podcast. Just deal with me. See? Look. Visual evidence. I'm on my knees. Fucking praying that this man does not ever leave before becoming head coach, which I think is the inevitable. Marcus, please, for the love of God, just stay. And I get that there's a lot of quote-unquote jobs out there. Spoiler alert, most of those jobs are ass. Most of those jobs are you're just not going to be able to compete because there's the power imbalance at this point.
Well, and the good jobs are probably too good for him. Like, I don't think LSU's hiring him to be their head coach. Yeah. I think the types of head coach jobs he'd be looking at would be group of 5 teams or weaker Power 5 teams, like an Indiana. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I don't think he's in contention for the Florida job. So yeah,
exactly. Yeah, you're not going on to the top tier programs. They're just not taking you on. So you're going to go into the middle tier, and then you're kind of off into oblivion at that point. And he's an incredibly talented coach, and he'll probably make whatever team he goes to better. Absolutely, he will. He's an incredible recruiter. He's an incredible coach. We almost, to a point, with the exception of a badly timed interception, we almost did not give up a fucking touchdown in the month of November. 2012 type shit. So he's incredible. I love him. He's the man. Marcus, please, for the love of God, stay. And if he does, which I believe that he would, because I think, Brian Kelly's 61 years old. And yeah, I mean, Nick Saban's 70. The coaches can go it's until, their late 60s or early 70s. I think Brian, I think he's getting to a point he's quite content in life. Yeah. Seems like he's probably on his way out by the time he turns 65. I think you just build yourself more of a reputation. You think of Brent Venables right now. Anyone would love to have Brent Venables, and LSU would take Venables, right?
Yeah.
If Venables wants any coaching job, I think he gets it.
If Brent Edibles
level of caliber as a coordinator first. And I think by the time that happens, Kelly will be gone, and then he'll be the next head coach in Notre Dame. And I absolutely unequivocally want that. That would be the best. I want Marcus Freeman as the head coach in about 2 years' time. And I think in about 2 years' time, he'll have plenty of jobs that he can take on the table. There's still plenty of schools, and at that point there will be plenty of top end schools because either guys will be getting fired, taking a new job, or going to the NFL.
Yep.
College football is cyclical. You'll get another shot. Please just stay, build a name for yourself, and I think by the time you do, you'll be head coach at Notre Dame, and that's the penultimate job, right? So that's my pitch to him if he's listening. I know he is. He's our best friend. Let's face it.
All right. So I agree. I don't think he's leaving. I don't think there's an enticing enough head coaching job to want him. I think he's done an excellent job, but I don't think I think he's been great all year, but I don't think he's been like coordinator of the year all year. Like, I don't think he had clearly established, and it's going to take time too. I mean, you could see the development. He's a fantastic coach, and I don't want him to leave. I just don't think he's becoming a power top of the elite head coaching candidate yet. I think if Ohio State were to have a job vacancy, if Ryan Day goes to the NFL, I think that's Luke Fickell's job. Maybe he tries to bring Freeman on as a DC, but I don't see Freeman going lateral for a DC. I think he's only leaving for a head coaching gig. And I just don't think that's coming. So I think I do disagree with your assessment there. I not yours, Steve, but the questions. I do think he's staying. What does that say long term? I don't think that necessarily means anything. I think just, keep waiting until a big program is coming. I think the fear of losing him after 1 year was maybe just fear. It might have been in reality at all. I think maybe Freeman did plan on staying here a couple of years, but he's not going to stay here forever. So I think that Notre Dame is going to make him their next head coach. If I were to put a bet on who succeeds Kelly, I think it's going to be Marcus Freeman. I'm curious if Tom Rees will still be around for that. I would absolutely love for Joe Brady, the man who orchestrated the LSU national championship offensively, to be brought in some capacity as offensive coordinator or as co-coach. I don't care. That's my dream scenario. And it's not even Urban Meyer anymore. Because if you guys recall, it was a season or two ago, Steve and I had a fun Urban Meyer debate on the podcast. I think we've moved past Urban Meyer. My ideal future is Freeman Brady. So yeah, I think he's not going anywhere, and I do think it doesn't necessarily mean anything for his head coaching future at Notre Dame. But I also think he will be the next head coach at Notre Dame. I think he'll stay around for another year or two, and I think Kelly is going to be gone within the next 3 years. And honestly, if we were to win the national championship this year, I would not be surprised if Kelly just said, "All right, I'm done."
Right off of the sunset.
And as he should. He's dealt with a lot of bullshit here, from his own fans, from national media, from other fans. Like him or not, or love him or not, you're going to have to respect him by the end of it. And I think if he just wins and takes off, no problem there. Congratulations on a great career.
And he does deserve significantly more adoration and respect and just gratefulness, because I mean we could have been a dead program. We could have been.
Yeah.
As I've said, I think in the last couple weeks, LSU, USC, Florida, Clemson, Michigan up until this year was just a middling. Michigan State has been by and large dead. Penn State just cannot catch traction. Oklahoma, now they're in disarray right now. No, Texas stinks. Miami, horrible. Stanford can't get anything done. Nebraska, it took them decades to finally get, and they're 3-9, and I'm actually high on them for next year to maybe go like 8-4, right? So it's just Tennessee. Tennessee dead. Georgia is, one call away from having their coach go to the NFL and them becoming, a middling SEC program again.
Or one NCAA recruiting violation reporting away from losing everything. That might be it too.
Knock on wood. Alabama is one old guy who's 70 years old and who should just be 6 feet under at this point away from being potentially threatened at their dynasty, right? So it's just, this is total so fleeting is what I'm getting at.
100%. Sorry, Steve, but this is total hearsay. But I have a colleague of mine who went to the University of Georgia, and I told him the rumors we've heard about Georgia recruiting, and he's like, yeah, I've kind of heard that too. That's just hearsay. Don't write a report based on that, but I think Georgia's time is coming up pretty soon, if anybody has the guts to say anything. All right. One more question, Steve.
Yep.
P Wagon asked this one, so it's actually for me. But I invite you to comment on this since you're a person with opinions. So P says, outside of New York, Boston, and Chicago, I don't know why he picked those three, but with the exception of those three cities, where would I, Dylan, move if I had to move to the States, referring to the United States of America? So I need your opinion here because I, of course, know the United States fairly well, been around a bit, but not too much. How would you answer that question? I want to hear your take first because I know what it's not.
Am I answering for me or am I answering for you?
For you. Just tell
me, because I already have my answer.
Yeah.
Next year, and I would like to pre-qualify this statement since my wife is listening. In the game of life, you make plans and then God laughs at you, right? So like anything, disclaimer, anything can change at any moment in time. So let's let that be heard. But next year, I will most likely, if I had it my way, the odds would be 100% moving to Charleston, South Carolina. So that's it's a coastal city. It's warm. I can play a ton of golf. I'm going to be able to work remotely. Wifey is in healthcare. She can work anywhere in the world. So like it's a small town. We're small town vibe kind of people. That's why we love Boston. It's just Boston is just too expensive. So that's kind of like the rationale behind it. And that's what kind of just suits us. So if I were going to answer for me, obviously that's where I would land. If I wanted to answer for you, I was actually going to quiz you and ask you a handful of questions first, and then after building my profile, I could make a recommendation.
You know what? Let's do that. So for me, I interpret this question as major cities. So we're sticking to kind of the ones that would have like a franchise or large enough for everybody to know. So you ask me my criteria, what I'm interested in, and see if you can profile me because I've listed a few cities I'm interested in, but I want to hear your opinions.
Okay. First things first. You are Canadian, so that means that you've never not been in snow every single day of your life. I'm pretty sure it just snows 24/7 up there. Do you want a temperate climate? Okay. Do you want a warmer climate? Do you want a colder climate, or do you want to experience all four seasons?
So I don't really care about that too much. I'm kind of open to whatever. It can't get more wintry than it already is. Okay. But I don't think I would miss it if I didn't get winter anymore either. Like I don't think weather. I'm looking at my list and there is a bit of a theme of warmer weather, but I'm not going to because I would probably pick Boston. He excluded Boston, but I've got a little bit of a detachment there. I like Boston. I like New England. It's very close to where I'm from in Canada. So yeah, weather's not a big deal for me. I'm kind of comfortable with whatever.
Yeah, but I mean Boston, I can't speak highly enough of it. I love the city. It actually is kind of heartbreaking for me that I think I'm going to end up moving most likely, but neither here nor there. Okay, so we're taking climate out of the picture. Next question. Are you comfortable with having an extraordinary, like, do you get any sort of anxiety? Or are you comfortable with being around a ton of people? Like if you're in large crowds, traffic being a lot, or even just walking on the streets if there's tons of people around you, what's your comfort level with that?
Yeah, I'm comfortable with that. I've lived in cities for a couple of years now, and I'll be living in Toronto eventually. So, yeah, Toronto's the fourth biggest city in North America. So, I'll be fine.
Toronto's in North America? I'm fucking with you. Okay, so now we've got population density, and we have and we have climate. Now let's go to nature. Are you one to be, skiing, snowboarding a lot? Are you one that wants to go on a bunch of hikes, maybe, walking a lot? Golf, is that something that's kind of in the picture? Because that I feel like that's a very, nature centric thing. So do you like being outside a lot, or are you perfectly fine with kind of just like being in, densely populated areas and kind of, concrete jungle?
Yeah, I think that's a bonus, but I'm not building around it.
Okay.
But you did make me think of a city now that you bring that up. That would be pretty cool. This is enlightening. I like these questions.
Okay.
For me, it's probably more fitting in a bit with culture and stuff. Like, not that we're too different culturally, but like, I'm just trying to think. Like I actually don't think I'd like to live in Los Angeles. I think that's just too much. It's too hot, and there's too many people.
Hot.
I don't mind warmer weather, and I do have maybe a California city listed, but it wouldn't be LA. Like, there's some places I don't think I fit. So that's kind of my main focus, and I've got, let's see, I got 5 written down currently of major cities. Like, I'm sure I could live in some random town somewhere, but of the main ones, I've got 5.
Okay. All right. Makes sense. I'm just looking at the map of the U.S. right now. And then I guess one of the last questions I have, importance of being in a city with major sports franchises.
Not too important, because I will only go if it's my franchise. Like, I'm like I don't go to Montreal Canadian games because I live here. You know, I'll go when my team comes, but I'm not I'm not hardened by that.
Okay. All right. So I have a couple of recommendations. All right, I'm going to give you 5 recommendations. In no particular order, I'm just looking at the map, and whatever I see, I'm firing at the hip. Okay. First recommendation is San Jose, basically Bay Area of California. Okay. You know, San Francisco could be included here. Not particular certain if you want to live in San Francisco or just kind of in the area, you know, Tech Valley, whatever that is. Okay, so that's one. Okay. Second is Denver.
Yep.
Third recommendation is Minneapolis or Twin Cities.
Okay.
Next recommendation would be Philadelphia.
Okay.
And then final recommendation is going to be Washington, D.C.
Interesting. Okay, so 2 of your recommendations are on my list. So I was trying to put together a list of cities while we were talking. I had San Fran, maybe my number 1. It's not LA, so San Jose, I would count that too. That area seems really nice. Not too big, but also it's like beautiful city, California. I wrote down Denver when you brought up areas to do things like skiing. Colorado, I think, is actually a really beautiful state. Here's one I'm sure you'll hate: Seattle. Seattle, to me, the only issue with Seattle and San Fran is I don't really want to live on the West Coast. Eastern time zone's the best time zone. But Seattle is pretty Canadian-like. It's very similar to Vancouver. So that I would kind of fit in easier there.
I was actually going to throw Seattle on the list. I don't know. I'm always been intrigued by Seattle and would want to visit there. I just personally wouldn't want to live there. But
all right, so here's 2 ones I don't think you would have thought for me, and they're a little different. One is Miami.
I knew you were going to go with Miami, man.
I'm interested in Miami. It seems like a lot of fun. I don't know. It'd be in my top 10 at least.
You thought that LA was too hot, but not Miami?
Yeah, well, LA, I get like a muggy feeling. Like, I feel like the city is just so many people, so many cars.
Really? So there's practically no humidity out in LA. That's why they consider it perfect weather. It's basically 80 and sunny every day with low humidity. Miami is basically a salt marsh.
Interesting. I think the interest for Miami is like the partying and also like the rate on the Atlantic, which I kind of like. Being an East Coast guy, I kind of like the Atlantic. And another one, Dallas. I don't think of Texas as a place. I'm Canadian. Open carry states scare me a bit. But Dallas seems to be actually quite nice. The whole Dallas-Fort Worth area. I am a Cowboys fan, of course, but like it does seem pretty advanced. Like it seems like a pretty like developed city. Like it's not 1800s rural Texas like I think a lot of people think Texas is. Like Dallas is a massive city. Seems to be a good business industry as well. So yeah, I had listed those 5, and I think they're all great. But the truth is I'm probably not leaving. I'd like it here. I mean, there's always a lot of money in New York, but we'll see. I should ask you guys for next week where in Canada you want to live.
That actually is going to be a fantastic segment because knowing Mr. Wagon and his answers, it's going to get absolutely loopy.
Yeah, I think, but I also think that's a good time to stop the show. Thank you guys for tuning in this week. If you like and support the podcast, consider making monthly contributions through listener support on Anchor. You could find the link to that in the description below and on our pinned tweet. Any kind of contribution there helps us sustain what we're doing, and keeps putting out quality content. Like 5-star review on Apple Podcast. You know the whole ordeal, and we greatly appreciate it. So, Steve, is there anything you want to say before we sign off?
Let me double check. One Google search. Give me 4 seconds.
All right, 4 seconds. In that 4 seconds, listeners or people on Twitter, tweet at us what cities you'd recommend I live in, and we'll contemplate them. And I'm sure Steve will give a glowing review of all of them.
Okay. All right, I can't find it, but I thought there was an early signing day that happened in December. Am I crazy?
Yeah, no.
When is that?
I don't know the specific date, but I do believe it is December. I think it's right after some of the bowl stuff. Oh, yeah. That's a good question. The early signing period.
Yeah, that's what I was looking up. I mean, whatever. I don't have the date, but that should be coming up. And with that coming up, Notre Dame's expected to, as they historically typically do, they have most guys signed and enrolled, usually at this point at early signing day. So as that kind of happens, we will definitely cover recruiting. So that might be the second or third week of December, but that's kind of on your scheduled programming. So get ready for that. We're gonna have a couple of some fun over the next couple of weeks. So be sure to tune in, share, like, subscribe, 5-star review, because what happens is we piss off a bunch of different fan bases, and then what they'll do out of spite is just like go to our link and then just like bomb us in the reviews. So if you like us, if you support us, if you ride with us, if you like the A+ quality videos that I like to put out that I definitely did not steal from like stock accounts, then by all means, 5-star review, we would certainly appreciate it. And that's all I got. Go Irish, baby.
Well said, Steve. Notre Dame 11-1, another successful season, and we await to see if we make the college football playoff. From all of us here at the Four Horsemen podcast, thank you for listening, and go Irish.